All right, so sorry that like it wasn't from Anchorage, but I stayed up all night making all that for you. You guys cool with the pizza and ice cream that I just brought?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. I got you. Sweet. Cool. So we were talking about demographic transition yesterday, and our last little piece, we're going to talk about how do we calculate these things. So underneath demographic transition, which remember is high birth, high death, and then we make that change to low birth, low death as we develop technology, medicine, those things. We need to talk about how we actually calculate things. So we might have this, but I don't think so. Typically, and this is a strange thing to do, it feels weird anyway. Typically, we discuss or measure these things, population issues per 1,000 people. Now, depending on the situation, that number could be bigger. So if we were to look up, for example, murder rates, do you guys know where the most dangerous city in the world is?
Anchorage.
It's not Anchorage. I guarantee it's not Anchorage.
New York City.
Not New York.
Mexico.
So it very well could be Mexico City. It could be my guess is somewhere in Central America. Like, I didn't look this up, but we'll just see. Normally, you give percentages, right? Like, but you can't say like 1% of people murdered. Is that a lot or a little?
A lot.
That's huge. Like, that's terrifying. Let's find here real quick, just a quick Google.
India.
Most dangerous, or I'm going to get flagged, city with highest, we're just going to say crime. All right, so this is just the U.S. So these are just in the U.S. I want to see what city in the world. Colima, Mexico. So check this out. Homicide, which is the more real word for murder, 140 per 100,000 people. Now, that is not a clear percentage, right? 140 per 100,000. This is a larger number. When you're talking about big populations, a percentage doesn't make sense. We'll see why. Do you guys know what this percentage is?
50%.
So careful. 140 out of 100,000.
1.2%.
So 1,000 would be 1%,
Okay.
which means 100 would be 0.1%. This is 0.14%. Like, that's a small number. Yo,
Oh, yeah, what's homicide?
homicide is murder.
Oh.
Yep. Okay. So, most dangerous city is Colima, Mexico, which they have a lot of cartel stuff that happens, so that makes sense. A lot of gang violence. Anyway, here we go. When we're doing stuff in here, even though we just saw that that number was per 100,000, much more common to see per 1,000. So here we go, math equation, and we're going to do some math. We're going to calculate out and see how do we calculate out PGR percentage. Now, going through this, there's a couple ways we could word this. Let's just think about how this happens. What makes up, like, how does a population get new people? Birth. So we can have birth rate.
Or migration.
Ooh, love it. So check it out. Births, we're going to look at total population. We're just looking at a percentage. So births produce new people. Love it. Plus, what do you call it when people come in from elsewhere?
Immigration.
So immigration, and it is migration, you're right. But immigration, we're going to add to it. So people are born and people immigrate. Those are two ways that our population gets bigger, right? Okay? And when we look at this, how do we lose people?
Deportation.
So death rate,
Oh.
what did you say?
Deportation.
So it could be deportation, you're right. But deportation is just a very specific type of what? Emigration. So people leave, people are born, people come in, people die, and people leave. These are the ways that we change it. Now, normally, if we wanted this as a percentage, what would we divide it by?
100.
So normally by 100, right? Now, here's the weird part. Because we're doing this per 1,000, instead of dividing by 100, we're going to divide by 10 to make the adjustment. So notice, if it's normally divided by 100, which is our percentage, right? We're just now going to multiply it by 10. or divide by 10. So it scales it up. Okay, so let's check out one of these things. And let's just find some numbers and see how we can get this. All right, so let's dig into it. And I want to find like a real, I had an example, but I don't know where it went. So we just need a couple years with population numbers. And bear with me, we're going to get one. So population growth rate. Let's find it. Where'd it go? I had like a whole math problem set up and ready to roll. All right, so check it out. Let's say that we have the following example, and we're going to calculate one of these. You guys should have calculators in your desks, but we're going to use some kind of old numbers, and we'll go not too terribly fast. So let's say in the USA, we're looking at stuff, and within the US, here's what we're told. We had 14.1 births per 1,000 people. So 14.1 birth per 1,000 people. Okay, and this is over the course of a year, roughly. Okay, furthermore, we had 8.3 deaths per 1,000 people. And I'll get you a year here in a minute as well, if you're interested. And then hypothetically, let's just say migration, which I'm going to use your word there, RJ, because migration can be in or out, right? Is we're going to say for 2.1, and I'm going to write it here. Migration was plus 2.1 per 1,000. Okay. As we look at this, we have birth rate, we have death rate, and we have migration. Now, because I'm changing this just a skosh, when I say migration, it covers which two? It's immigration and emigration, right? Why did I stress that it was positive? What's bigger if this number's positive, do you think? People coming in or people leaving?
Coming in.
Coming in. If it were negative, what would it mean?
Going down.
More people leaving. Okay, with just these numbers, and this is, I'm trying to tell you the year. This is 2008. I want you guys to find me the population growth rate as a percentage using just these numbers. Talk it out. There's 4 of you. If you open your desk, there should be a yellow calculator in it. I think. Is there one in there, RJ? The one next to you will probably help. Yep. Is there one in your desk, Bam Bam? All right, so I'll just borrow you this one. Check the desk next to you. There's probably one in there. Yep. Cool. It's not yellow, but you can use that one. Cool. Use these numbers. Talk it out. Let's get our, in 2006, let's find the growth rate percentage. If you guys need me to help type stuff in, I'll show you in a second. Because my guess is we're going to get different numbers. But we'll see. What do you guys get for this? And I'm just going to plug in, or do we need to look at this together?
Together, no one stop.
Yep. So I'll talk it out. I'm going to do it in gray just so I can tell the difference. The population growth rate. Let's just see what numbers we're going to plug in. What do you want? It's going to be a fraction, right? Now, do you guys love fractions? Is it easier to divide or to multiply? I prefer, so really the same thing. But I'd rather multiply by 1/10 than divide by 10. But I'm okay with whatever you want to go with. So I'll do a division since that's how we write it up here. What's the first number I'm going to put in? 14.1. Cool. 14.1 And then what else?
Plus
Plus
2.1.
2.1 minus
8.8.
8.3.
It doesn't say anything about immigration.
So notice, and this is where I did this. This is both of them.
Oh, I see.
And there should be another M, and it's going to bug me. But when we just say migration, that's where we talk about that positive and negative. Okay, and we're going to divide all this by what?
10.
By 10. Now, if you guys just type this into your calculator, and I'm going to be real judgy for a second, but just shout out your answer when you get it. .79. Okay, I'll wait to see what somebody else gets. So I'm going to write all the answers up here because I'm thinking we might get like 4 different answers. I heard .79.
I got the same.
Okay, so that's 2 of them.
Got the same.
You got same? Okay, never mind. We're all getting the same thing. All I'm going to do, because I just borrowed you mine, I just want to check it. Okay, I like the way you did it. Cool. Bam Bam, .79? Did you really get .79? Show me. Because you don't seem super confident. Because if you have a mistake, I assume I know what it is. Okay, cool. So, careful here. You divided by 1.
Oh, wow. Oh, but actually.
Yep. Which all we gotta do is, since it says answer, we can just go up. I'm gonna get that number again. We're gonna divide it by 10. Okay.
Yo, my sister put in.
What?
Oh, yeah, okay.
You get me every time, Bam Bam. All right. So check it out. When we're looking at this, PGR, we get this number to be 0.79. Now, is it really just 0.79%?
No,
What do you think? Why?
there's probably more.
So the real number that you got was 7.9?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we do this first, it's 7.9 over 10, yeah?
Yeah.
Now, if we didn't put it over 10, remember, this is per 1,000 people. Okay, so when we look at it, we just divide it by 10 to make it. We get a growth rate of 0.79%. Okay, careful with this. Does this mean that we're declining?
No.
No. What would it have to be if we were actually, our population was shrinking? It would be a negative number. So we're growing, just not crazy fast, right? Okay, are these things super hard to calculate? I don't think so. I think that I had one number wrong, but that's okay. The real number is 2.9, but I'm not going to change it because it would change everything. Cool. If you guys had to calculate one of these on your own, again, on like a quiz or a test, could you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably.
I can.
Okay, like you may not remember the formula every single time, but no cards and things like that, right? Cool. All right. So we are nearly done with this whole section. Yeah, with the whole chapter. Now, just because I think it's interesting, and I hope you guys do as well, if we look at population growth rates, and we talked about these briefly the other day, do you remember me mentioning any countries that are getting smaller? Japan is a good one to think about. There are other countries in the world. So we'll just look at this briefly. Okay, in your book you will see this. Here's population growth rates of countries. Now, going through here, we see Afghanistan grows really, really, really fast. And we're going to see like a cultural connection to this. Brazil, also growing. Bulgaria, where's Bulgaria? Eastern Europe, awesome. Okay, Bulgaria is shrinking in population. Germany is shrinking in population. All these other ones, I don't understand why they didn't show Japan here. That's an easy example. They don't show Russia either. I would bet that Russia is pretty similar to the rest of Eastern Europe. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little negative. Now, there is a connection here that this isn't like, we're not a social studies class, right? This is a science class, but there is a nice connection that we can make. A lot of the time, these population things are driven by a bunch of different societal factors. So if we think about it, in the 1960s, we saw, since the 60s, the U.S. birth rate has like started falling. Okay, women started having less babies. One of the connections there is women's rights. If women have the right to choose whether or not they have a child, more often than not, it seems, in at least a modern economy, women elect to not keep having a bunch of kids, like kid after kid after kid. Now, it's not going to be true of all these countries, and I've never been, but I've seen. Afghanistan, is right now a good place or a bad place
Bad place.
for women?
Bad.
Why?
They don't have any rights.
So I don't know if any is true or not. Like, there's probably not much. Like, again, not social studies, but I do know that they don't have much. The women's rights movement of the 1960s and forward has led to Western societies, women having less children. Women here don't get the choice, so they average significantly more kids. I don't know for sure because I've never been to these places. Do you think women have the right to choose whether or not they get pregnant and have babies in Kenya? My guess is no.
Yeah, they also must.
And it's not just a guess. I'm connecting with this, right? There's a correlation between the two. Nigeria or Niger as well, same thing. Nigeria, U.S. lower. The more rights that women have, typically, not always, but typically, the lower that birth rate is going to go. Okay, so I do want to highlight there are, because you commented on Muslim, like absolutely a lot of those countries are Muslim. Not the only thing that determines it though. It just depends on which variety and how hardcore people want to be about it. Okay, cool with that. Now, when we look at things, there's a few specific situations that might happen and a few little things that I don't think we have to talk like wildly about, but we should look at it. Is it possible that birth and death are the same? Like roughly the same rate?
No.
So let's say that it's 100 out of or let's do 10 out of 1,000 are born over a year and 10 out of 1,000 die over a year. That could happen, right? What would happen to the population in that situation? So we're just going to get a couple little pieces here. We're going to define for ourselves, and these are their own standalone sections, but we're not going to write much. We have a definition here. There's a situation where we can get zero population growth. Okay, zero population growth, which we can shorthand Z PG. Zero population, weird, growth occurs in a very specific situation. When you take the birth rate, which give me the real word for birth rate.
Mortality.
So mortality is death.
Yeah. What's that?
Natality. Okay, when you take birth rate and you subtract mortality or death, and then add or subtract depending on the sign the immigration. In or out, doesn't matter. If these three things add up to zero, your population stays constant. Right? Like nothing will change about it. And it's never going to be exactly perfect. But in this situation, this is fairly common in reality. Happens with human beings, a little less, but naturally there's limiting factors that stop a population from getting too big, right? And when they can't grow anymore, not every population just decides, oh, well, let's cut numbers down so we can keep growing again. They'll just hold steady at that carrying capacity. If we are holding steady at a carrying capacity, we're pretty close to the ZPG. Okay, does that make sense? Like easy enough? Do we need to talk more about it, or is that cool? All right, sweet. So beyond that, other thing, and we've alluded or at least briefly mentioned most of these, we also have age structure. Now, this is a huge problem in some countries, and this really splits into three categories, and we'll just make sure we look at them. Age structure, as we look at it, we'll just say the number of male and female within a given range. And I'm going to say given age range specifically. Now, this thing, just so you know, there's going to be three different age ranges that we talk about. I'm aware that maybe these aren't perfect. You're aware that these aren't perfect. But we need to have some line somewhere to kind of think about these things. So, three different stages, and then we're just going to say roughly, or the ages that, as far as demography considers these. So, first of all, we have pre-reproductive stage. And then I'm going to list all three, and then I'll just get your guys' input on years, and we'll put years inside the parentheses. Okay, and I'll do that here in a minute. Okay, you could be pre-reproductive, which pre meaning before the ability to reproduce. And then you could be what? After your pre-reproductive stage, where do you think you go? Before a basketball game, you guys have pregame?
Yeah.
What happens immediately after the pregame?
Indeed.
The game.
Yeah.
So what do you think happens right after the pre-reproduction stage? The reproductive stage. And then thoughts on the last one? One more. After or post. So we get these three stages: pre-productive, productive, and post-reproductive. Now, these are not going to be perfect. And all of a sudden, I've written this word and said it so many times it doesn't feel like a word anymore. The post-reproductive stage. Not stage, stage. Cool. So looking at this, pre-reproductive certainly starts when you're born, 0 to, and this is where you're probably not going to agree with this, and it's challenging. What demographers typically define as 0 to 20? 0 to 20 what? And I should probably put something. Years of age. And I was going to say years. So from 0 to 20, people are typically considered pre-reproductive. Are there issues with this? What's the issue with it? Say it again? No, you're good. You said 18, right? So why 18? Say that one more time. So notice, I don't care about proper, right? Like that's like, we're not looking at societal age. At 18 in this country, you're essentially considered an adult. What about 500 years ago? Would people wait till 20 to have kids? No. Realistically, as soon as a woman's cycle starts and a man undergoes, or a guy, whatever you want to call it at that age, an adolescent, I suppose, undergoes puberty, people can reproduce. So that age varies wildly, more so with women than it does with men, but it does vary. Most women and men are able to have children before 20. But just for the sake of this, we're going to cut off there. Okay, which means starting at 20, you can keep having, like, you can make children. And this is like the best time to make children, quote unquote. 20 to how old do you think?
50.
So, with this, don't know how much you guys know about human anatomy, because you've obviously all had the health discussion with puberty and all that, but the other side of it's probably less concerning. Have you guys ever, do you know what menopause is? Okay, so women, obviously every month they have their cycle, right? It happens. Women are born with the eggs that they're going to have. There's a finite number. It means they don't keep making new eggs forever. All the eggs that a woman's ever going to produce are already in them. And then it's just every month they release an egg, right? And that happens. That stops at some point. So the age varies here again. Roughly what demographers decide is 44. Now, menopause itself is when that cycle stops. And because there's no more menstrual cycle happening, hormones have to balance out. If you've ever watched, if you guys are TV people and you ever see like an older woman, I wouldn't say like super old, right? 44, probably really old to you guys, but it's not super old. They often make jokes about like hot flashes and things like that. Really common symptom that comes with menopause. Okay, which means 44 to, we don't have a real number here. 44 to what?
85.
I mean,
To death.
death?
There.
Okay, is considered post-reproductive. Okay, again, I want to be really clear here. You think it's possible that a 45-year-old woman can have a kid? Yeah, it's certainly possible. It's less common, but it can happen. I think a 50-year-old woman sometimes can have a kid, but it's going to be rare. The older you get, the rarer it gets. Now, men do not undergo the same change that women do because we're like biologically different. There seemingly is not an upper limit to the age of men, though. An 80-year-old man could still have a child with the understanding that like their sperm cells and stuff may not be as functional as they used to be, which makes sense because everything's getting older. Okay, looking at this, if you again were king of your country or president, whatever, where do you want the most people to be?
Germany.
So not location-wise, in which stage or which age structure do you want the vast majority of your population?
Reproductive stage.
So the reproductive stage, because right in the middle, because not only are they the ones that are making babies, they're also doing what? They're working and fueling the economy, right? Now, there's an obvious issue. If we build up this reproductive stage to be huge, and then we wait 30 years, all of a sudden, we have a large post-reproductive stage, which these people may be in retirement and stuff, and they have to get supported by somebody, right? So there's this cycle that we go through. It's a very fine balance. Just as we look at things, we'll go back to this figure. Okay, here are age structures in the 3 different countries. So notice they split between men and women because specifically that changes. Going through, not a huge shock in Kenya. So we're in Saharan Africa, right? Okay, not a lot of 80 to 100-year-olds. Does that surprise you?
Yeah.
It does
I know.
surprise you? Doesn't surprise me. Now, looking at it, obviously, they have recently started growing really fast, or it's all been kind of the same?
Growing fast.
They're growing fast because look at how many kids, or the amount of population that we have. This is the percent of the population in the pre-reproductive stage. If we just eyeball it, what's that? 5 and 6 and 6, or at 17 and 10. 27% of their population is below 20 years old, which is a pretty big number. Now, this one, they have 2 options. Either they keep growing this fast, because this is just going to shift up, right? All these pieces are going to move up over time, because people get older. If they all of a sudden have a decline, and this is flipped, notice how many older people you have, like a ton of older people that need to be supported by very few young, if this flips. Now, U.S. has done a pretty good job of this. This is in 2015. This population right here, they're going to move up here, and they're going to be replaced. We're pretty constant. We see like the same growth rate year after year, roughly the same amounts. Germany, whatever reason, large group of really old people, and we see these changes. Here in a few years, they're going to be in trouble because not as bad as Kenya would be, but if this whole graph shifted up, notice there's way more old people than there are young people right now, which means taxes are going to have to go up to fund all that. Okay, I don't like weird. I don't know what I was going to say. My brain just stopped working like mid-sentence, which doesn't normally happen. Cool. Seem reasonable? Easy enough? Okay. Looking at that, Earth has a carrying capacity for all animals. Like every environment will have a carrying capacity. It varies. How well we can like collect resources and things like that are going to change. If all of a sudden we lost all stuff like technology, a big solar wind hit our planet and knocked out all the electric grids, what would happen with our carrying capacity? It would go down, right? Like if all of a sudden today they made the announcement, oh guys, sorry, we're out of oil. Like everything that we do relies on oil. We're going to see our carrying capacity that right now, 12 billion maybe, like that's on the high end. We're going to see that crash down to like, I would say less than a billion if we have no oil, because we've lost all that old idea. Okay, tonight, you get a few problems. Cool. So, yeah, let's knock it out. This evening, and starting now, this is the last thing of chapter 4. We're going to do homework 4.2. And you're going to find this waiting lovingly on page 92. And I want you guys to do problems, or questions rather. Ooh. Let's do 1 through 5. Okay. Just so it doesn't come as a surprise. I've already told you we're not going to do like an individual test this chapter. We're going to have a team test tomorrow. Okay. We're going to do it like we did before. If you want to make a note card, you can, but I'm not going to require it. I'm going to let you guys use and open your notes when you need to. but I'm going to ask that as a class we try to work together tomorrow to answer as much as we can without the notebooks, and then that tells me, like, I'll look at it and you'll tell me how many. We'll talk tomorrow. Team test tomorrow. Open notes. I'm cool with it. We get like 3 minutes.